Hey guys, this is Jules O'Loughlin. You're listening to Cinepod, the cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, Ben. Welcome back.
Howdy. Welcome back. Where did I go?
You know, it's been a week. It's been a week since you and I have chatted because, you know, it's another fine episode of the Cinematography podcast.
It is. Hey, who's on the show today?
On the show today is Jules O'Loughlin, ACS, ASC. Those letters after his name, of course, stand for the Cinematographer Societies that he's a member of, the Australian Cinematographer Society and the American Society of Cinematographers. Most recently, he shot the TV series Ms. Marvel and The Old Man, and you got to chat with him quite a bit about all kinds of stuff. But first up, it's Close Focus. What do we have to talk about today?
So there is a Hollywood Reporter story by James Hibbard about Amazon's upcoming Lord of the Rings series. It's a TV series. You watch it on your television. You know, it's like the A-Team or The Incredible Hulk or 60 Minutes. Except this series, the new Lord of the Rings series that is coming to Amazon in just a few months, apparently cost $465 million for one season of television, which I believe must be the world record like 10 times over.
My understanding, though, is that that number isn't fully tabulated yet. And that's like the minimum number. Like it could be even more than 465 million. Like it could go up to $1 billion.
$1 billion TV series. And here's the thing. You're Jeff Bezos. You're one of the richest people who's ever lived, and you're worth many billions of dollars. So you can just do this. I guess you can just do this. And you and I are old enough to remember the kerfuffle around Waterworld when Waterworld came out in the 1990s and went ridiculously went way over budget. And I feel like the budget became the story of Waterworld, and it kind of made everybody want to pre-hate it before it even came out.
People were rooting for that to fail. They couldn't wait to see how terrible that was. It was incredible. I remember people like going. That was the first time I remember going to the theater with people who were just looking to hate watch it. They were going to hate watch Waterworld. Yeah,
and I actually remember a similar sentiment around Titanic just a few years later.
and even Avatar.
But Titanic, I feel like it turned it around. People just loved that movie. And it's not that they hated Waterworld. Did you ever see Waterworld?
You know, I saw it in the theater, actually, and I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it at all. It's a B movie, but, you know, it was a decent B movie. It didn't break my top 5 Kevin Costner movies, but, you know, it was probably number 6.
Yeah, I haven't really done a ranking of Kevin Costner movies, and I don't know that I will do one.
DOA.
My favorite Kevin Costner movie, The Big Chill.
Big Chill.
Anyway, so for all of you old enough to know, literally you only see his wrists in The Big Chill. He was in it and then got
the dead body
completely cut out of it. So anyway, I think that there can be like a weird schadenfreude that we experience around something that goes over budget or something that just has what seems like a world-shaking, enormous budget that you could have done any number of things with, but instead you played with your Hobbit toys with the world. But one of the things that's kind of interesting about it, and our producer Alana Cody pointed this out to me, there's a part of the article where it says Amazon spending will trigger a tax rebate in New Zealand of $160 million, which is 114 million United States currency. And it's controversial in New Zealand, and I quote, as the government could end up on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars to help subsidize Amazon's Elves and Hobbits drama series. So, in other words, because it's so expensive and they get all these tax rebates because they're spending so much money, it might end up putting the government of New Zealand on the hook for quite a bit of this very, very, very expensive endeavor of Jeff Bezos's.
Yeah. And, you know, just to put it in perspective, I believe in that same article, they have the number for what a season of Game of Thrones isn't even 25% of that.
Game of Thrones, I think it was like about $8 million an episode, so $80 million for a full season. And I was once in a meeting about a show that never got made, so I'm not throwing anyone under the bus. But it was one of those times where I happened to be in the room with big Hollywood players, and they were talking about something, and they were talking about doing this show for HBO, and they used Game of Thrones as an example, and they said that's $8 million per episode. Can we do this show for only $8 million per episode? And if I were to tell you what it was, you would say, of course, it is less ambitious than Game of Thrones, or maybe on par ambition wise. And all the underlings, including myself, we all looked around like, the fuck is wrong with these people? Of course you could do it. And here we are. And Jeff Bezos, I mean, how many episodes is it in a season? Is it 10? That's insanity. That means that they're spending $46 million per episode.
Yeah.
If it's 20 episodes, then they're spending over $20 million per single episode.
Yeah,
that's
it's a ton.
And it's premium cable, basically. It's Amazon Prime. So Amazon Prime doesn't do 20 episode seasons. It's going to be 10. So in other words, they're spending
a ton of money on lobster. It's going to be like flown in lobster every day, every meal.
Yeah.
No, it's probably going to be super ambitious. This is probably going to have huge VFX. It's and because Jeff Bezos is a fan, I have a feeling they're not going to be telling any of the showrunners no when it comes to, hey, we want to build this, or we want to shoot this, or we want to do this.
Well, I've seen the trailer. It looks like there's a lot of visual effects. It looks like a lot of CGI. And CGI, if you do it a certain way, can be that expensive. And hey, God bless them if all this money is going to like VFX people or the talented people who make these shows, because it's not full of big movie stars or anything like that I know of. So that means that a lot of that money probably did go to like building sets or building VFX assets or whatever. So, hey, maybe they're doing it right. Still, it really does sound like you could have cured world hunger, but instead you wanted to watch hobbits fight. Little bit of that.
Well, we're all going to get to watch it relatively soon.
Very soon. Sure. And I look forward to it. And hopefully it'll be good. And again, I'm not letting the price tag, I'm not letting the sticker shock bias me against the show. Like, hopefully it'll be fun. Like the A-Team.
Yeah, I hope so. Which was surprisingly fun. Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. And a fraction of the cost, even if you adjust for inflation.
That's true. All right. So Ben, let's get to the interview with Jules O'Loughlin.
All right.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
I am here right now, transcontinentally. You're in Australia with Jules O'Loughlin. Holy crap. Thank you so much for coming on, Jules.
Thanks, Ben. Actually, I'm not in Australia. That's where I live. I'm there occasionally. I'm actually in Vancouver at the moment. I arrived here just a few weeks ago doing a TV series here.
Can you say what it is?
Yeah, it's Percy Jackson and the Olympians. We're doing it for 20th Century and Disney Plus. It's
Awesome.
It's a lot of fun, but we're a few weeks into it. It's a pretty full-on show, a lot of volume work, which is all the rage at the moment.
Ooh, well, before we even get into it, we have spoken to Greg Fraser, who is, arguably one of the inventors of the volume shooting for The Mandalorian. But how do you like it? How has it developed? I mean, I feel like we talked to Greg about it when The Mandalorian season 1 was still going on. So how are you finding it? What are the awesome things and the limitations? Because I feel like it's probably the most recent humongous innovation in filmmaking that enables us to do just some incredible stuff.
Yeah, it's it's a really interesting space in which to work. I kind of find it a bit of a double-edged sword. It reminds me of the 3D days. I did a few 3D features, and on one side, it's amazing and what you can do there and the images that you can create. But on the flip side, it's very restricting. So the great positive is that it's a very controlled space. You can create fantastical worlds on the volume stage and shoot them kind of live, so to speak, like you're actually on location. And it's very controlled. You're not affected by issues of weather or location availability or, say, issues with COVID. But the flip side is it can be very restricting. You are effectively in a box. And for those who don't know a lot about it, the whole space is it's LED screens. And on those screens, you project say, the plate shots that you may have gone to, say, Jordan to shoot, or images of, say, a landscape on Venus that have been created by, say, something like software. But the big thing for me and for my fellow compatriot Pierre Gill, who's the other DP on Percy Jackson, it's the ceiling. And I constantly say we're fighting the inverse square law. And by that, I mean that the lights are just too close often. And so the misnomer about the volume is that it lights the set for you. In some situations it can, but in most you have to augment your lighting when you're using the volume. And that means you've got to get your lights inside that box. And so it's a real dance of trying to make the lighting look naturalistic, but working in a way that you wouldn't choose to work or ordinarily wouldn't work unless you're in a really small soundstage or in a location that's very restricting. And so that's my big thing. I can't often, it's hard to get the lights far enough away. And so you're using other kind of tricks to counteract that. So it's like any kind of technology in the film business. It's like, I've never heard of any bit of technology where it's like, oh my God, this thing is just the best thing ever. And it's 100% foolproof and it's fucking brilliant, like everything's got pros and cons. But the other kind of thing that I feel is, well, gosh, I hope we don't go down that path, is that we never shoot on location again. I mean, the upside is maybe we never do a night shoot again. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to not go to all these fabulous locations that you have the chance to do as a filmmaker, that would be sad. But, it does, that technology does give us the ability to go to really far out crazy places as a film crew and not really go there, but just step onto a stage and pull some really amazing visuals off, and make it work. So, so it's exciting. It's fun technology, but without any kind of new technology, there are occasionally sleepless nights.
Yeah. Someone needs to write the textbook on how to do it. So let's talk about some of your very, very current work, because you have two extremely different shows that you shot on that are both being released. I know one of them was made a few years ago, and it's Ms. Marvel and The Old Man. And honestly, it would be hard to think of two shows that are even more different, even though I guess there's a weird connectivity in that The Old Man was directed by John Watts, who directed the new Spider-Man movies, but could not possibly be less Marvel-y in its approach to storytelling. And then Ms. Marvel, which is it's reductive to say it. It's kind of a YA story, like it's aimed sort of at teenagers, but it's super colorful, super kinetic, versus The Old Man, which is extremely naturalistic and very grounded. And one of the things that I love about it is it's setting such a great stage for such amazing acting performances by such terrific actors. So I know The Old Man, they shot that like 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, we started The Old Man, or John Watts and Sean Porter started shooting, when it was October or November of 2019.
Yeah, pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So The Old Man is set in modern day America, and it follows the story of Dan Chase, played by Jeff Bridges, who's an ex-CIA operative. And he's kind of been hiding for years and years, or living under an assumed name. And he was heavily involved in operations in Afghanistan in the 80s during the Soviet occupation. And his kind of counterpart there was John Lithgow. Anyway, so the show takes place, as I said, in modern day America. Dan goes on the run when his past catches up with him. He also goes to Morocco, and then it flashes back to the Soviet occupation in Afghanistan, and the young Dan Chase is played by Bill Heck. So that the idea of the logistics or the location work on that show was that we would shoot half of it in LA, from October 2019 to March of 2020. And then on March the 15th, I remember these days distinctly, March the 15th, we would have fly to Morocco.
Oh, no.
And do another couple of months of shooting in Morocco. Now, of course, on Friday the 13th of March, we, along with many other productions around the world, were closed down because of COVID. And from that moment, it was like, my God, what are we going to do? We're only halfway through the first season. And so, but then over the preceding months, production, the showrunners, John Steinberg and Dan Schott, had to decide what was going to go on with the Moroccan trip. We were due to fly to Marrakesh on the 15th, and of course that was cancelled. And so they decided in the end that they would shoot the remainder of the season in California, up in Santa Clarita, the desert around Santa Clarita, Blue Sky Ranch. And so they set about building Afghan sets up there and various other sets. And when I returned to the show in October, that's exactly where we went to do this. And I've got to be honest, I was so bummed that we weren't able to go to shoot in Morocco. But fortunately, we had a fantastic VFX team led by Eric Henry. And the first time I actually saw those finished renders of what we had done in California and the way it had stood in for Afghanistan, I was just blown away what those guys had pulled off. It is extraordinary. I mean, it looks as though you are in Afghanistan. Man, they nailed it. Those guys just did such an awesome job. And so while it was really sad that we couldn't get to Morocco and all the great experience that would have been, we had a fantastic time in Santa Clarita. And of course, so we came back in October and we shot through to December. But of course, Jeff, partway through of that second iteration of the season, was diagnosed with lymphoma.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
And so I think he had about a month and a bit with us before he had to leave and go into treatment. Yes. And so then we were faced with what we could shoot. And we did quite a bit of stuff with his stunt double. And we did a little bit of face replacement of some of that work.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, there was a little bit of stuff that I shot that had face replacement on.
I kept noticing, like, one of the things I love about the show is that as much as I love a good Matrix movie or something like that, the fights in this don't look like balletic John Woo movie fights. They look like two people trying to murder each other.
Yeah, that's right. They're down and they're dirty, man. They're in the gutter. Absolutely. And Jeff's listen, I got to say that Jeff did a lot of that work. And he's got a fantastic stunt double it's uncanny.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I would watch those fight scenes and I was like, a lot of them are also done with, they're not oneers, but they're minimal editing.
That's right. And a few of them are oneers, and we do the old Texan or cowboy switch. And of course, we have hidden cuts in a few of those oneers. But the whole idea of them was to make them as visceral and as real as possible. And for the audience to hopefully believe that is their character, Dan Chase, the old man, fighting. And of course, Jeff Bridges, that's the beauty of cinema. The contract that we have with the audience, if hopefully we've done our job well, then they believe what they're seeing. But I got to say, Jeff did quite a lot of that work. He was remarkable. And the good news is it's been picked up for season 2. It's been greenlit. So
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
Are you going to be back on it next season?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's really cool, isn't it? I mean, it's just so kind of gritty and real. And you get the likes of Jeff and Amy and John Lithgow, and you just can't take your eyes off those guys. They are.
Every performance is just so solid. And also, like we talked about, Bill Heck, the guy who plays young Jeff Bridges, is so good without feeling like he's doing an impersonation. Now, from a cinematography standpoint, did you do anything to light him or lens him or favor one side versus the other to make him feel more like Jeff Bridges? Or, I mean, as an audience member, I just kind of accept it's, the Jeff Bridges character is a young man. But did you do anything at all to kind of...
Not at all. No, nothing done lighting or lens-wise. That was all thrown in Bill's lap. But these guys, their younger selves, these actors are so good and the story is so interesting that certainly it works for me, and I hope that it works for the audience. And listen, all the feedback is this show is really successful. It's done super well for FX, and by all accounts, people are really enjoying it. So, hopefully that's the kind of job done to an extent. It can never be perfect, right? But it's filmmaking, you've got to embrace the imperfections.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it's the willing suspension of disbelief. I think as a viewer, it's not hard for me to say that's young Jeff Bridges. I was just curious if there was anything that you would do to aid in it. I feel like he embodies it, as does the gentleman who plays young John Lithgow. I also wanted to talk to you because I think it's in contrast in a way to Ms. Marvel, which is a show about visual ingenuity in so many ways. with the old man, so much of this show is like really well crafted, well acted dialogue scenes between amazing performers. All of these actors it's just a murderer's row of amazing actors. And in those moments, it's never not visual. It's always intriguing to look at. But how do you go about finding those moments and saying, like, here's how I'm going to support the actors? And then what do you do?
Well, as cinematographers, we do, well, for me anyway, you tread softly. You know what those big moments are in the script, and you've just got to be super respectful and to give the actors the space, and as much as possible, don't impinge on that space with the technical. So I guess at first instance is you just got to be ready. You've got to work with the stand-ins. And you got to ensure that the set is lit and the moves are worked out. And this was the type of show where we could do that. I mean, everything we shoot now, there's an element. You have to be good and you've got to be fast. That's with everything. The schedules on every show, they're always challenging. But this was a show that didn't have that air of it's all about the schedule. And it kind of shows through in the way that we shot it. It's not a coverage fest. We're really trying to craft the show in a particular way to kind of lean into a certain rhythm. Getting back to your specific point of the actors, I don't know. I mean, part of that just, I think, comes with experience of just recognizing those moments where you just want to support the actors and give them the space and to communicate, for me as well, to communicate that to my crew, to go, hey guys, this is one of those moments, a really important scene. And these guys are going to be acting their chops off. So let's just kind of keep all the talk and all the other stuff that goes on and set to a minimum and respect that space. But most crews, certainly this crew that I work with in Los Angeles, are super experienced and they know about those moments as well. And the other thing is, Ben, is that you've got these actors also who are super experienced, really professional, and they know what they have to do, but they also know what we have to do. And I think everyone is working in lockstep just to make it a really great experience. And a shoot like that or any shoot is all about ebbs and flows, and experienced actors and experienced crew know those ebbs and flows. And there are times to, you can have a bit of a joke on set or things get a bit light. And there are moments where you've got to tense up and it's like, right, this is why we're really here for this moment and we're going to make it as good as possible. And everyone seems to know those moments.
So let's move to Ms. Marvel. And I ask a lot of the people who are kind of working in so-called peak TV, it's like The Old Man is definitely kind of a peak TV show. I know it's made for FX, but most people are probably watching it on Hulu. And Ms. Marvel is only available on Disney Plus, and it's part of the Marvel universe, but it's like what they're doing on Disney Plus with the Marvel shows, be it WandaVision or Loki, each one kind of feels like it gets to have its own world, and Ms. Marvel is no exception. So tell me, like, what were the marching orders on Ms. Marvel look-wise? Because it's so colorful and so inventive and so fun in its basic instruction.
Well, that's it, fun. Like Kamala's personality, lean into her personality and have fun with it, move the camera, have colorful lighting, make it expressionistic and ultra real when it had to be, and then real when it needed to be. But it's have fun with it. I mean, the audience for this show, a younger kind of audience and a strongly female audience, absolutely. Muslim audience, South Asian audience. This show is massive at the moment in Pakistan. They're showing Miss Marvel in cinemas in Pakistan. My director, Shameen Oboid Chinoy, is extremely well regarded in Pakistan. She's won 2 Oscars and 7 Emmys for her documentary work. She arranged with the government to have Miss Marvel shown in movie theaters because Disney Plus hasn't arrived in Pakistan as yet. And that country is going crazy for this show. And it's an American-born girl of Pakistani heritage and all the wonderful kind of cultural things that have been infused into the show, and people are really responding to it. And it's fun, it's not gritty realism by any extent.
So what are the visual rules for a show like this? Because it really does feel, it is covered, there's coverage, but it feels very constructed. Like it feels like it's covered so that we're going to go out on this shot and then transition to this thing. And then we're going to do a graphical thing here. And then we're going to be in another scene. Like so much of it feels really thought through how the show would be constructed.
Yeah. So, I guess the overall planning for the show, it was originally, Ep 1 was directed by Adil and Bilal and that cinematographer, Rob Breck. They came up with an overall plan for the show. It was, there weren't any kind of hard and fast rules. It was more about Kamala and leaning into her powers and leaning into the fun of her personality and letting that infuse itself into the camera work and into the lighting. And I guess as much as possible, we just wanted to feel energetic. We wanted to bring energy into the camera work, as long as it fed into the narrative, But certainly for EPs 4 and 5, Sharmeen is, as I said earlier, Pakistani documentary director, very highly regarded in that country. And we wanted to lean a little more into her documentary background. So to that end, we did do a lot of kind of handheld work and a lot of observational work, especially with the massive partition scene that you see at the end of episode 4 and 5. And so it was kind of more leaning into her background and her way of working and making those episodes feel as though they were part of the show as a whole, but making them also a little distinct. And they're distinct anyway, because at the beginning of episode 4, we fly to Karachi. We go to Kamala's, where her extended family live. So by that nature alone, where the show's going to look a little different.
Yeah, it's. I was going to ask. It's like, how do you make it your own when it's got to fit into this whole thing? But it's like that story arc is so separate from the rest of the story.
That's right. We don't want to depart from the show in any massive way. You know what I mean? But I've kind of learned over the years with certainly with doing television that you're working with the same characters and the same kind of story, and in this case, the same powers, so you can afford to take a slight deviation with the episodes, and the audience will go with you as long as you're doing it well and you're pulling it off. For the audience to go, oh my God, I'm in a completely different show, you've got to make a really drastic departure. And so we were able to kind of pull away somewhat from the show and drive it in a new direction, much like the narrative is driving in a new direction. Kamala's going to Karachi to meet her family. And then in Ep 5, she travels back in time to partition, 1947 India. So, you already had that deviation in the story. The other great thing that we had at our fingertips was that, Eps 1 to 3 and 6 shot in Atlanta for Jersey. But in our Eps, we went to Bangkok, because we needed some locations that could easily stand in for Karachi and that could stand in for India. And at that time, it was at the height of COVID. We started shooting in...
I was going to ask you, because COVID, India got hammered right around then, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So we started in January of 2021.
Oh man, you're like right in it.
That's right, into May of 21. And at that time, Thailand was kind of similar to Australia in the way it was handling COVID. They had very strict kind of quarantine rules. And so the COVID numbers were really low at the beginning of our time there in January, but they did explode midway through April, and we started to lose locations and we started to get restricted. But we got through to the end and we were able to shoot in just some amazing locations. And so we were lucky to be able to go there and pull it off. And I think it shows on the screen.
So let's go back and talk a little bit about your career. I always like to know from everybody, what was the moment in your life where you realized cinematography was a job, an occupation, and it was something you could pursue?
It wasn't, I think, until I was about 19 or 20. But that was the moment where I went, oh my God, there's someone who actually shoots this stuff. There's someone who's responsible for the camera. There's someone responsible, I think they kind of do the lighting as well. But that was the moment the kind of penny dropped for me. which is funny because I came from a very early age. I'm the youngest of 10 children.
Oh, wow.
And, I grew up in out of Sydney, and I had a father who was a barrister. He was a lawyer, and my mum who brought up 10 kids, but who died when I was quite young, when I was 8. We went on a family holiday in the mid 70s. My brother was rowing in the World Cup. He was in the Australian 8 and rowing the World Cup in Switzerland. And we went on this family holiday through Europe, like the Griswolds, but with tents. I think there was about 8 of us.
Oh my gosh.
And my old man gave me a camera. And from that moment in my life, I started taking photographs. And then the other thing, like any young kid, I was interested in movies, but there was a moment, bear in mind, I'm the youngest of 10. So by the time it comes to me, I mean, I'm not even sure whether the parents know. My parents knew that I existed. You know, Jules is off doing something. Who knows where he is back in those days. But I used to go to the movies a lot on my own from a very young age. And I saw 2001, I think it was at the Roxy in Sydney, and that film had this incredible impact on me. I had no idea of what it was about, but I knew it affected me in a really powerful way. And from that moment, I started kind of watching films and, of course, loved them and was engrossed in them. And I did my photography, but I never put the two together until my early 20s, where I kind of realized that photography definitely had something to do with movie making, and it was called cinematography. And then who was this person called the cinematographer, and what did they do? And so that's kind of when the penny dropped for me.
And did you pursue going to film school, or what was your path to starting to pursue it?
Hell no. So my old man was he was a great supporter of the arts, but he didn't believe in you working in the arts. And so I started out doing various things. I went to university and I started commerce, and I did that for 2 years and absolutely kind of loathed commerce. But I had some mates who were working in the futures exchange in Sydney. And so I got a job as a floor trader, and I did that for some years. I put myself through law school, but there were a few moments there where I kind of wanted to leave. There was one moment where I wanted to go and get a cadetship with the Sydney Morning Herald, one of our big newspapers in Sydney, in Australia. And I wanted to get a cadetship as a photographer, but the old man kind of talked me out of that. And then there was a moment where I thought about film school, but it was always like, you've got to get a proper degree, and you've got to have a proper career, and you support the arts, but you certainly don't work in the arts. And it wasn't until my old man passed away in my late 20s that I had this kind of come to Jesus moment where it was like, my God, what am I doing? I'm a futures trader, and I've got a law degree. And should I go into law? But I'm not interested in any of that. And so I threw in that career. I metaphorically ripped up my law degree, and I went to a kind of a smallish film school in Sydney. But I had my eyes set on getting into the National Film School, the AFTRS, the Australian Film, Television, Radio School. And at that time, they only took 4 students in each discipline. So they took 4 cinematographers, 4 directors, 4 producers, 4 production designers. So it was very, very competitive to get in. And I did a few things in the couple of years leading up. I started attending their short courses. I started helping and assisting on some of the projects that they were doing. And I got known to some of the lecturers there because I knew getting in, I didn't have any I had 2 short films under my belt, and I hadn't been shooting for that long. And I wasn't going to get in on the basis of having a bit of experience in the film industry. So I knew I had to be known to the lecturers, and they had to know that I was super serious about what I wanted to do. And so when I applied with a stills portfolio, which by that stage, I'd been shooting for many years, stills, and I'd done a lot of traveling, and got into the National Film School. And that was kind of the beginning for me. And I came to it I think I was about 31 by the time I graduated. But by that stage, as any mature age student knows, if you decide to do something at a later age, you have a career kind of move, then you become single-minded and incredibly focused. And that's what I was. I knew I had to get into that film school. Failure was not an option. And I got in, and then a year out with some of my fellow students, we shot a movie, a war movie called Kokoda, which got us a lot of notice in Australia. And then that kind of, I guess, launched my career in Australia.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've talked to a lot of Australian DPs, and Australia has, such a vibrant industry of its own. I always bring up, there's a documentary I saw at Fantastic Fest some years ago called Not Quite Hollywood. That's about the exploitation films of Australia, but it's where you get people like George Miller.
Yeah, we had a pretty amazing film industry, really kind of landmark films that we all saw as Australians. But was it a real career? Could you actually make money out of it? Could you pay the mortgage and send the kids to school, and put food on the table? I don't know. Certainly when I was coming out of film school, it didn't feel like that. It felt as though it was going to hard to kind of break in. And that's the one thing they don't teach you at film school, right? Is how do you break into the industry?
Yeah.
What do you have to do? Who are the people that you have to call? Certainly in the feature landscape, when I came out of if it hadn't been for those guys that I went through film school with and a few really lucky breaks, back then it was kind of like, how do you break into shooting movies? No one's going to give you a movie to shoot unless you've actually got one on your resume. And back in that time, which was 2004, and I would say I think now it kind of feels as though it's more achievable, because I think there are a lot more Australians too making it in Hollywood or making it internationally. And
Sure.
The young guys and girls at film school kind of see that and they go, oh, this is, you could actually have a career doing this. Because I speak to a lot of young people about that thing about how do you make it? What do you have to do to break in? And I don't know, my best advice is, you got to try and be at the right place at the right time. So open yourself up to as many possibilities as possible. Go to as many events, try and meet as many people in the film industry. Go to film industry parties, join those news groups and newsletters. And, it's I don't believe so much in luck. I believe that you get luckier by opening yourself up to opportunities.
Well, I hate to end it there because I feel like we could talk, we could definitely talk about Angel Has Fallen. We could talk about Black Sails. You have a lot more, but hopefully we'll have you back on the show after you do your next series anytime you want to. But before we go, where can people find you? Obviously they can see your work any number of places, but do you have a website or anything people can check out? Yeah,
I've got a website, which is juleso'loughlin.com, and I'm on Instagram at jules.o'loughlin.
Excellent. I am subscribing right now. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and amazing work. And I can't wait to see what you do next.
Great to talk to you, Ben. Thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun.
So that was Jules O'Loughlin. Thanks for being on the show. And if you guys out there listening want to go see some of his most recent work, go watch Ms. Marvel on Disney Plus, and The Old Man, which is a FX series, is streaming right now on Hulu. Well, Ben, you know what time it is right now.
It is, I don't know. You tell me.
It's time for the dad joke of the day. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Oh, boy.
No, it's time to pay the bills. We have to thank our friends over at Aperture, maker of fine professional grade LED lights. And the product that I really want to feature this week is called the P600C, which is a very large, extremely bright light panel. Essentially, it is a pixel mapped. It's got 4 quadrants, so to speak, so it can do all sorts of high-tech effects. But it is also just big and bright and high quality RGB WW, so it's full colors. It's very similar to some of the other professional level panels out there, but it's even brighter. It's one of the brightest panels in existence, and it doesn't break the bank. It's also a fraction of the cost of some of the big ones. And I will say that there are dozens and dozens of them in stock at Hot Rod Cameras right now. We recently received a shipment with cases. There's a version that includes a case. And if you were thinking about making some giant, big, epic production and you wanted a big key panel light, you could do a heck of a lot worse than the Aperture P600C. And it is an incredible value. So take a look if you need a bright panel light, especially if you have a stage or something like that. We know a couple of stages nearby that are pre-lit now using these Aperture panels, and they're really, really impressive.
Can I say, like, the first time I ever heard of Aperture is when they started advertising on here. And now Aperture is everywhere. Every shoot I've done is stocked with so many Aperture lights. And even just yesterday, my own beloved Corridor crew dropped a YouTube video where they tried to compete with the sun. They tried to create the same lux as the sun using entirely Aperture lights. So,
Wow.
So it was like, wow, this is the most interesting commercial for Aperture I've ever seen. We're trying to outpower the sun. It's pretty interesting.
Nice.
And now, short ends.
So Ben, it's short end time. What is your pet obsession this week?
Well, it's kind of a sad thing, but I really feel like this is the right place to talk about it. We never had Tom Richmond on the show, which is really our loss. Tom Richmond is a cinematographer who passed away this week, actually. David Mullen, who's been on the show, he posted about it on Facebook. And I'm a fan because he shot a lot of like 80s B-movie stuff like Jim Wynorski's Chopping Mall, Straight to Hell Returns for Alex Cox, some I'm Gonna Get You Sucker for Keenan Ivory Wayans.
Yeah, classic.
Like, he shot a lot of really awesome movies and then kind of hit a big stride in the 90s, and he shot movies like Roger Avery's Killing Zoe and Little Odessa, Love in a 45, Mr. Stitch, Mother Night, which I would say is the best Vonnegut film adaptation ever done, and Slums of Beverly Hills, Wild Horses. Like, he shot so many just amazing movies. Just a really prolific, talented guy who made so many of the movies that made me, you know, like really, really influential, amazing DP. And according to everybody who I saw online kind of talking about him, just a really awesome dude. And anyway, I just thought it should be mentioned. Tom Richmond, rest in peace.
Terrible loss for the community. So,
yeah, it's a real bummer. He shot palindromes for Todd Solondz. I always love it when Todd Solondz is such a specific, quirky ass filmmaker. Anyone who got to shoot something for Todd Solondz definitely has a place in film history for me.
One of the most overlooked movies, I think, of 2006 was Right at Your Door. I loved Right at Your Door. It's brilliant. And if you have not seen Right at Your Door and you want to see something like, I think it was the B camera operator from Right at Your Door pretty well. He's a client over at Hot Rod Cameras and a dear friend. I've known him for a very long time, Joseph Sattel. Joseph Sattel worked on Right at Your Door, and he told me, like, I think a ton of that movie was lit with like Christmas lights and all kinds of cool stuff like that. So it's like, he also shot really, really good
House of a Thousand Corpses for Rob Zombie. I mean, like, look at the versatility of this person. Really amazing cinematographer. So, this week, while you're trying to find something good to watch, maybe find something that Tom Richmond shot. So, Ilya, let's bring us out of the funk. What's your short end this week?
My short end this week is something that is definitely sort of going around on social media. People are talking about it. You can watch it on Hulu. It's an FX series called The Bear. And The Bear is set in Chicago. It is a television series all set in a restaurant. So I know immediately, Ben, it should be your kryptonite. But
no. Well, I've actually seen a few episodes. It's really good.
Well, I was going to say it feels sort of like the Chicago bastard cousin of like Succession. It feels like, it's not exactly cut from exactly the same cloth, but I have a feeling that if you're into Succession, if you're into rapid fire dialogue, if you're interested in anti-heroes, and FX has made, their brand is anti-heroes. That's what they're all about. I think you might like The Bear. It's got a lot of inside kitchen lingo and stuff like that. And there's some very honorary characters in there. It's a blue collar show, but it's also about sort of like worlds colliding and healing and tragedy and all kinds of other stuff. So I've been binging it. I've basically through the entire season now. And I think I've only started like 3 days ago. So it's worth watching. If you need a new television series, it's on FX. It's on Hulu. You can stream it right now. It's called The Bear.
Very cool. Well, amazing work. Yeah, I have seen the show. I know that just because it's about food doesn't mean I don't want to watch it fundamentally. Probably my favorite scene is the one with where they're at the French Laundry and Joel McHale is kind of leering over our hero and telling him he's a terrible chef and he should quit. And it's like, I'm watching it. I'm like, why be so uptight about cooking food? Good God. But yeah, it's a hard Scrabble show. I would call it hard Scrabble.
Hard Scrabble works. It's definitely not for the faint of heart if you are offended by language, because there's all kinds of language and insults and basically people kind of acting horrible to each other for big chunks of the early episodes. And there's sort of a camaraderie that develops and builds. And I'm not going to give anything away, but if you want something that is not exactly like something you've seen before, but enough like something you've seen before that you might like it, if you are into the other sort of stuff you see on FX or HBO, The Bear might be up your alley. I think it takes a couple I think it takes a couple of episodes to really catch its stride, but it's been fun. It's been good. I can't wait to watch the last episode of the season tonight.
Well, cool, man. I think that about wraps us up. Who should we thank tonight?
Hey, let's thank Alana Cody. Alana Cody, who is working like a mofo, working, hard scrabbling it out right there. Yeah.
Hard scrabble.
Exactly.
Living her own version
scrabble.
of The Bear. There's a TV show just about Alana Cody working her ass off, getting us amazing interviews.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's like, her with a Bluetooth headset, yelling at people inside of a car somewhere. Yeah, that's
kind of like
it.
Jerry Maguire, but it's like lots of snap zooms.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Hey, let's thank Kays Alatrachi. Kays, hey, thanks for this music.
Can I say something about Kays?
Yeah.
I can't say what it is, but Kays.
Okay. Well, then,
Kays directed.
I want to tell you something about Kays, but I can't tell you what it is.
I can't go into details. I can't get specific. But Kays blew me away. He directed kind of a long form-ish project for somebody that we both know. And I saw an early cut of it. And, the old saying, no movie is ever as good as its raw footage or as bad as its first cut. So I knew I was looking at an early cut. Holy crap. He just did an amazing job. He directed it. He composed the music for it. He did the color grade for it. And he did a ton of VFX on it.
Wow.
So, right. So the person that we know who hired him to get this got basically, 5 guys for the price of one. And I'm really excited for him because I think it's one of the best things he's ever done.
Oh, all right.
As a director.
Exciting. I can't wait to find out more. I'll have to hit him up.
Yeah.
Hey, let's thank Ben Katz. Ben Katz, who I think we actually made his job pretty easy this week. And not too many ums and uhs.
Big meaty gaps. Like when we had to take a pause, we took a big pause so he could see it on the waveform. Really?
That's right.
Yeah. There are easier ones and harder ones, Ben, but I think this might have been one of the easier ones. I don't know. What do I know?
I think so too. Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
When you ask like all the people on a crew, on the second to last day of production, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be one of the good ones. What do you think? And they're kind of like, yeah, but you never can tell. And it's really true. When you're on the crew and you do the whole production and you think, wow, we really got something great here. And then you see it later and you're like, holy crap, I can't believe I worked on that. I can't believe that's how it turned out. And then later when it's like, oh my God, this is such a stinker. And it becomes this massive, fan thing. You never know. You have no idea when you're on set, when you're working, what's going to come out. You don't know if it's going to be a colossal turd, polished turd, or the Academy Award winner.
The single biggest clusterfuck I ever worked on turned out pretty good. Who knew? It was Bloodsport 2, and it was like there was a crew walkout. There was almost a mutiny. The director did not direct. It was a sloppily made thing. Now, they had a great fight choreographer in Philip Tan. They had a great DP in Jacques Heitken. And between those two people and I would say a reasonably capable cast, mostly capable cast, the end product wasn't going to win any Academy Awards, but it held together and it was quite watchable and it was fun. It was what you want out of a Bloodsport movie. But working on it was like living in anarchy.
Well, you're a testament that you pulled through, that you didn't die, and the movie got released, and it probably made a couple of bucks by now.
Probably by now. Anyway, so but I think that about wraps us up.
All right, Ben, where can people find you if they want to get more Ben Rock in their life?
I mean, who doesn't? Definitely go to benrock.com. That's where you can find me. And all my social media stuff is on there. You can check out my reel. You can read the bio that I had to write about myself. Don't like writing bios about myself, which probably comes through in the writing. But, check it out. And you can find all my social medias there. Befriend me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook at your will. Say hi. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com. You can, hit us up for all kinds of camera and lighting and other production equipment. That's where you'll find me most times. All right. So Ben, I think that just about does it for us. You got to sign off. You got something to say?
I do have something to say. I want to see if this person is actually listening. You ready?
Ready.
So this guy I know, Taylor Hammersla, who I was actually his mentor because we both went to UCF in the film program, moved to Atlanta, and he mentioned to somebody that he went to UCF on a film set that he was on in Atlanta. And a guy in the camera department said, "Oh, that's where Ben Rock went to school. I listened to his podcast." And then he talked about the podcast. His name, I believe it is pronounced Don Stelmasek. I hope I got your name right, Don. I hope you heard all the way through to the end of the episode. And thank you for listening to the podcast. I was like, hey, do we know each other? And Taylor was like, no, he's just a big fan of the podcast.
Okay.
Big enough that when you mentioned UCF, he's like, that's where Ben Rock went to school. That's weird.
That's a little weird.
Yeah.
Well, we'll certainly find out now if he's actually, listening to the podcast.
Yeah. I'm deeply flattered. So thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Don.
Let's end this show. Thanks for listening.
Let's do it.
Okay, bye.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.